Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. On today's podcast, we're going to be talking about correction and kind of a different use of correction that we have recently started using in our relationship.
But before we get to that, don't forget to hit the like button and lets us know if you enjoyed this video. And of course, hit the subscribe button because every time you hit the subscribe button, it makes me smile.
And if you want to delve deeper into the topic of domestic discipline, get bonus content, the best place to do that is over on Patreon. So a link to our Patreon is down below.
So I think one of the things that people might be confused about is what is the difference between correction, between punishment? Maybe they're a little confused about, aren't those the exact same things? I mean, how do we kind of clear that up for them in their mind? Because I know when we first started and you came to me and you're talking to me with all these different terms, I was going, I don't understand what the difference is.
Right. Correction is something that I feel like we always used a form of correction in our relationship, but that's not what we called it.
No, we didn't have that terminology because I remember this has been fairly new for us.
Right. And so correction is just a short spanking. It's something that is designed to be able to be administered immediately, take very little time, cause very little disruption in your day, where punishment is a more serious spanking. It is longer. Now, we don't have a difference of severity between correction and punishment. The only difference really is the length. But it is a spanking within our discipline system. It's just shorter and kind of easier to administer, like in the moment.
So what is the role of correction, and you know, why is this even important in the dynamic?
We use correction a few different ways. Now, part of our rules are we have rules that are more serious and that rules that are more habit-based, that maybe don't cause a lot of disruption to the connection or the authority structure in our relationship, but they are things that Coda wants me to do, so he offers accountability. And so for some of those more minor rules, then we'll use correction before it becomes a punishment, because obviously if I'm being repeatedly disobeying a rule or a standard, then it has to become a punishment at some point.
Absolutely.
But those more minor rules, we'll use correction first. Also, if we're just kind of getting off track.
Right.
You know, one of the things about correction is that it doesn't always have to be centered around a violation of the rules or standards. It can just be like, I can see that you're not maybe having the right attitude or having, you know, we're just kind of getting off track here. And so we're going to do a correction to kind of get back on track, recenter ourselves, refocus ourselves. But also what we've started doing more recently is kind of more of a preemptive.
It's like a preventative measure almost.
A preventative measure to offer kind of a correction to attitude, emotional overwhelm. Yeah, maybe I don't have the right attitude. I'm not in that more submissive headspace. I'm not showing up to my role the way I should be. And so you're offering correction to kind of fix that and preemptively prevent me from breaking rules that are more serious that would lead to punishment.
The one that comes to mind right off the bat is there's been in last month or so, there's been a couple times. In fact, there was a week where it wasn't necessarily happening daily, but it just seemed like there were a couple of days within that week where I just came home and I just felt the for lack of a better word, the vibe was off. There just was something about you and your demeanor and just the way everything was feeling that I was like, I just feel like you need a correction here. I need to try to put you back on this path where the vibe feels better, where I just feel like there's not this barrier. That's the way I think I could describe it. There was just like a barrier between us. It didn't feel right. It was like an invisible wall. And so the correction allowed me to kind of tear down that wall. And really, I felt like after it was done, it for lack of a better term, it like mended our relationship back together. That wall wasn't there.
I agree. And the reason we started using correction in this way was because I came to you and I said, I feel emotionally overwhelmed a lot of the time. I am just having a really hard time handling my emotions, handling my responsibilities, and it feels very overwhelming to me, even though it shouldn't, and even though my responsibilities are manageable, they are reasonable. I just feel really kind of emotionally overwhelmed, and I asked if you could help me with that. And I remember you asking, like, you wanted me to basically ask for what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you didn't want to immediately jump into, like, well, I can do this. And
Right.
so I sat with it for a few days and I was like, I think that this system of maybe asking for correction and feeling you lead me through the process of getting back to a emotionally stable point to be able to kind of face my responsibilities and face whatever I need to do within my role and within our relationship, that might really help me, and you were more than happy to do that for me.
Which is where we kind of realized this is how correction should be used.
I remember asking for guidance and direction months and months and months ago.
Yes, I recall this. Mm-hmm.
And it was before we really had this concept of correction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's before we shortened the corrections to the point where they could happen very immediately and very quickly.
Yeah.
But I remember asking for this because that was almost, I wasn't getting frustrated, but I was not really capable of communicating what I needed and what I was asking for before we had the system in order to say this system is what I need. And so once we got the system and I still had those feelings of like, I just need those little course corrections. I need guidance. I need barriers here so that I don't completely end up off the path needing punishment to get me back where I need to be. So that's what correction does. It's just a little course correction to kind of get back on the path, get back onto the direction you're supposed to be going so that you're not veering off, so that you're not putting yourself into the danger zone of earning punishment.
And I will tell you, I didn't even realize that my frustration as a head of household, that this was also happening. And what I mean by that is that I was trying to figure out, okay, how is it that I can prevent, because up until that point, we were having a punishment, it seemed like once or twice every week. And I was going, how can I prevent potentially a punishment from even happening? Like, there's got to be a way where I can stop it almost before it happens. And that's when we started, then I started listening to what Aria's frustrations were, and where she felt like she needed something to be prevented as well. Like, I didn't realize we shared this. And that's when we started to explore this idea of correction. And of course, the first thing was to shorten it, because the reason we weren't really using it, I don't think at that point very much, is because it was just as long as the punishment, if I remember.
It wasn't necessarily as long, but before we started using correction and punishment as like kind of the only two things within our discipline system, we had created like all these levels of punishment.
Yeah.
So,
oh gosh, that was made things. I thought that was going to make things easy, and it made things worse.
And so, in our previous system, where we had like, I think it was like a hard punishment, a medium punishment, a light punishment, all these things. What I would call correction now would be considered a light punishment.
Right.
And so it was a lot longer than our current corrections.
Right.
Not as long as like our punishments now.
No,
but
yeah.
it did take a while. It took way more than what it currently does. And because it was considered a light punishment, you weren't necessarily using the intensity that you use now.
Right.
And that made it less effective and more frustrating.
And because of everything that you just said, it made it harder for me to hold Aria to the rules, because I know some head of households can relate to this. It wasn't that I was trying to be lazy, but you know what is entailed to do a punishment. It just requires a little bit more, especially a mental effort. And I'm not saying that that's bad. That's exactly what is needed. But we needed something that didn't necessarily require a ton of mental energy. And what I mean is like when we do a punishment, and I don't want to go into too much detail because I've detailed this in other podcasts, but essentially, we take time so that I can think through a lecture, so I can really think through what we're about to do. And so there's a lot of time taken for that in a punishment. What we wanted the correction to be was literally, let's go out there, let's do what we need to do for the correction. There doesn't need to be a lecture hardly at all. It just needs to be, you need a correction, let's go out and do it. It needs to be quick and to the point. And that really helped me be able to hold you a little bit more accountable. And it really gave me this confidence to be able to say, you know what, this is not going to be strenuous. It's not something that I'm not going to want to do. It actually made me be more determined to hold you to the rules and to the standards.
Well, because any type of punishment, even when we were using the different levels of punishment, it does take a level of mental energy. It takes a level of physical energy.
Yes.
And
yes.
a time commitment.
Yes, right.
Because even before, a light punishment was taking like 20 minutes.
Yeah. Right.
Where now our corrections are about, the actual correction itself is about 3 minutes. The whole process is like 5.
Yeah, and maybe at the longest point that we've had has maybe been 10 minutes.
At the very most.
At the very most, but really, I don't think it's ever gone above like 7 minutes.
Yeah, I was about to say usually 5 to 7 minutes. And that is from the point of Coda saying, meet me out there in 2 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Him basically saying, this is why you're getting your correction. I think it is important for you to communicate that.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's like, no, I'm going to keep you in the dark.
You just need one. You just need a correction, so we're doing it. I mean, that is valid.
I mean, she would accept that. She would. But I do feel like as a head of household, you do need to let them know, because how are they going to correct that behavior if you don't tell them?
So usually Coda will just be like, hey, I can tell that your attitude is off and I need you to be more joyful or have a better attitude or come into submission, whatever the case may be. I need you to be able to handle yourself better, whatever that looks like. But it's very quick. It's usually 1 to 2 sentences. It's not a drawn out process. It's just like, you're getting a correction because I need you to fix this. And then the actual spanking itself, like I said, between like 3.5 minutes, typically. And then it's a quick, like, hug, reconciliation. Coda will say a few things to just encourage me, like, I know you can do this, you can handle this. I need you to
do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's simple as, I need you to correct this attitude.
Mm-hmm. And then it's, we wrap it up. We go about the rest of our day, usually our evening, because like I said, Coda works outside the home. So if a correction needs to happen, then typically it's happening within the first hour he's coming home. So we have the rest of the evening that we need to go through.
Yep.
But yeah, so that is just, it's such a more simple process when before it was taking so much longer. And yeah, you were kind of like talking yourself out of punishing me or holding me accountable or offering that type of tangible leadership and guidance, because you're like, I just don't have the energy to put into that.
And that's the first thing that I just want to touch on really quick, is that if you are struggling with any part of your domestic discipline relationship, and especially head of households, if you're finding there's just this lack of motivation of being able to hold her accountable, you may want to look at, like we did, maybe things are just not as simple and concise as they need to be. And that was the biggest thing about why we developed the correction, the way, and we restructured it, was because it needed to be something that I was motivated to want to do, and it needed to be simplified, and it needed to be effective. And so that's the biggest thing that I would challenge you to do. Just as a side note here, is if you're struggling with that, really just take a look and see how you need to streamline things.
Now, one of the things that we did that I think it's important to note is that when we started using this correction system to prevent rule breaks, to prevent violations, to prevent the breakdown of communication, all of the things that are much more detrimental to our relationship and our growth and our connection and all of those things, you really did start to require me to communicate with you
Yep.
when I was having a hard day, when I was experiencing emotional overwhelm, when I felt like I needed that correction in order to be in a proper mindset to fulfill my role. And so there have been times where I've texted you while you're at work, or I'll call you and I'll
Yep.
just be like, hey, I'm having a kind of a hard day today. Can we do a correction as soon as you get home? Because I mean, yes, you have walked in and you have sensed it and made that decision as well.
Yep.
But you really do want me to tell you.
Yes. Well, and that was really the biggest reason why we thought it was important to start using correction, and we have been encouraging people to use the correction, is we needed something, but we needed to improve the communication between us. There was something strange. I mean, we were doing really well in our domestic discipline relationship, but I felt like with you, that for some reason there was one little piece that was missing that I couldn't get into your head. And obviously I couldn't do that, but there was something missing to where I just couldn't wrap my head around. Like, why is it just seemed like the cart is constantly going off of the road?
And we had gotten to a point where we weren't having a lot of punishments.
Yeah, that was the other thing. Yes, exactly.
We had gotten to the point where I was following the rules. I
Yeah.
was doing everything that I was supposed to do, but I was kind of miserable doing it.
Yes, right. And it wasn't that I was being lazy of not doing punishments, but there was something in there where I was like, well, you technically haven't earned one, but there's this middle ground that is bugging both of us, really, right?
Right, because like I was following all the rules, I was giving you the respect, I was being obedient, I was doing what I was told to do and asked to do. But I just had such a lack of joy
Yeah.
and enjoyment and ease and happiness and fulfillment. I was starting to feel just really bogged down and heavy. And it just started to feel like submission was a burden. And that was causing you to not be as receptive
Yeah. Oh,
to
absolutely.
me.
Right.
And it was causing some dissension in our relationship, not on purpose, not because either one of us wanted that to happen. I was really trying to fulfill my role the way I was supposed to. I was really trying to give you the respect and give you my submission and fulfill my responsibilities. And I was doing all of those things,
Yeah.
but I was feeling emotionally overwhelmed and bogged down. And when we started to incorporate corrections to relieve my emotional overwhelm, to kind of put me back on the path, to help me feel like you are leading me through that process, I started to feel way more just free and much more joyful, much more happy, much more content in my role. And it almost turned submission from a burden into just this thing that I look forward to, that I
Right.
delight in.
That was the big thing that I remember we sat down and we talked about. Is I remember the first thing that I said to you was, I just don't think you enjoy being my wife. I don't think you enjoy anything about your life. And
just a side note, that was not like, because I feel like when most people have those conversations, it's kind of like end of relationship conversations.
No, it wasn't like that.
And it wasn't like that. It was
No.
mostly like you were trying to like get to the bottom of what is going on here so that we can fix it.
Yeah, because it was more of you're following through with all the tasks. You're doing everything that I've asked you to do. You're holding to the pillars that we put together, and we have mutually entered into this dynamic. Why aren't you happy? Kind of thing. Like we're checking all the boxes. What's missing? And again, it was just that brief attitude adjustment that needed to happen. That, hey, you're doing all the right things, but you need to have a good attitude about it.
Mm-hmm.
You are doing all the right things, but you need to remember that this is something that is that you should enjoy, that you should be changing your attitude and all of those kind of things. Like this was a more of a, you need to change this because you're doing all the things. So have fun with it, basically.
And I think that it's important to note that we did take a look at what I was being asked to do. We took a look at my task load. We took a look at our pillars. We took a look at
the punishment systems. We looked at everything.
Because you wanted to make sure that you weren't asking too much of me.
Right,
that
exactly.
My overwhelm or that my burden, that feeling of burden wasn't coming from a legitimate place. And when we looked at it, we were like, all of this is reasonable.
Yeah.
All of this should be able to be accomplished. It just came down to that I was struggling with my attitude.
The biggest thing that comes to my mind that you said was, you just said, there's just been a few days here where I'll just be honest. It has nothing to do with what we've set. It's all reasonable. I just woke up, frankly, with a bad attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said, and I just felt like if that was corrected, then everything else would fall into place. And so you were very open and honest about that. I just woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with anything else other than that. And so we used the correction as even though this is not the only thing, we are using correction though as, again, that attitude adjustment, so that it's just like, okay, you woke up with a bad attitude, let's fix that so that the rest of the day goes smoothly.
Or, this has happened many times where I wake up with a really good attitude, I start going throughout my day, and then something happens and it just makes me kind of like emotionally fall apart, where I'm like,
throws you off a little
none
bit.
of this is worth it. Like everything is terrible. And if you can step in and say like, no, you're going to work through those feelings and you're going to get back into alignment with your role and with, where I need you to be, then it helps me kind of refocus and recenter and come back into the rest of the day with a good attitude.
Yeah. And so that, I think, and what is that has helped me do as a head of household too, is it's giving me confidence in an area that I've never had confidence before. It's giving me the confidence to be able to say, hey, I can at any moment read her mood and go, this is just not feeling right. We're going to take care of it. And then it has given me the ability to say, you know what, I have in my hands, it's up to me to an extent. If something goes awry, it's because I didn't put a stop to it right at the very, very beginning. How many times have I said that, before something gets really, really bad, before an anthill becomes a mountain, you have the opportunity to take care of it. This, I really think, has helped me. That's where I've gotten the confidence, is to say, hey, before this becomes a huge issue, we're going to take care of it right now. And that has been so beneficial to our relationship as a whole, I think.
Because what was happening is I would get bogged down. I would get, into these like thought processes or just bad attitudes. And it made it to where every time Coda was asking me to do something, even something within the routine, if he was like, I'm ready for you to do this, and it was part of our normal routine, I'd be like, I just don't want to. And that's not a good attitude to have. Right. And it would spill over into how I displayed respect towards him. It would spill over into how I interacted with him. And eventually that does lead to punishment.
I remember when I first saw it, was one of the things that I've asked Aria to do at the end of the night is I love to have a hot cup of tea at the end of the night. And I remember I would just go to her, and it's in the rules that I just go to her and let her know what type of tea I would like that night. And she'd just go, and I'd go, what's wrong?
I'd be like, nothing.
And she'd say, I just don't really want to make your tea. And it was just like, but this is something you agreed to. And so this goes back to what we were saying. So when we had this conversation, if I get that from her, I just immediately go, hey, we're going to have a correction because your attitude's not in the right place.
I would say if it got to that point, it would probably be more than a correction because
Well, yes. But what I'm saying is that I've been able to sense that before we even get to the end of the night, because we've established that. Like the moment I walk in the door, even if she hasn't said anything, although she's been really, really good again to text me and just say, I'm not feeling good today, or this happened, I really think I need a correction when you get home. But there have been a few times where I've just walked in the door and I can automatically sense, I'm like, the vibe is not good. And I've just looked at her and said, we're having a correction. We're going to do it right. But that's been so good, because then the rest of our evening just goes great. It just goes great. And so I think the correction to me, not that all of this isn't important, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but the correction to me has become the most important tool in our arsenal that we currently have.
I actually completely agree, because it has prevented, again, more serious behaviors. It has helped us grow together as a couple. It's helped our connection. It's helped our communication. And it really has just kind of solidified all of our systems in a
Yeah.
way that nothing else has before.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to sound like we're really just overselling this to you guys, but really it's not. We're both want you to know that the correction, the way we do corrections now, has benefited our relationship so much that we don't have. I'm not saying that we have eliminated all problems, but we don't. But it's very rare that we have miscommunications anymore. It is very, very rare that we have fights about attitude, or that we get attitude happening in our house. We just don't have a lot of that stuff happening anymore, because the corrections are the first tool that I can go to fix the problems, and the rest of the night it just works well. If not, the rest of the week. To Aria's credit, when we first started doing it, won't lie, there was maybe a couple days in a row where we were doing corrections, but now it's a little bit more few and far between, because again, that has created those good habits.
Well, and I think that, there is circumstances where, I might still have weeks
Absolutely, sure.
where I'm getting corrected, maybe daily, maybe every other day. But there's also weeks where I go, 4 or 5 days without a correction.
Absolutely.
It just kind of depends on what's going on, what my mood is, how I am approaching things, and kind of where our communication is, because all of those things do play a role.
Absolutely.
And so it's not a bad thing to need more correction.
No, not at all. And I don't want to paint that picture, but it's just all to say that the corrections have really helped us, for lack of a better term, correct some of the problems that we were having. And again, it gives me confidence as the head of household to be able to always know that tool is within reach, and it's an effective tool.
And I was going to say that we had family recently visit.
Oh boy, yeah.
And one of the comments that was made was that I just seemed a lot happier in our relationship and in my role. And
from a very unlikely person. It was just like,
they know
wow.
Nothing about our dynamic, but
Nope.
they could just sense that I just was a lot happier in our relationship. And so that just goes to show you that it really does work, and it's noticeable and tangible.
And the other comment that was made, and I'm pretty sure I told you this, but she may be hearing this for the first time, is you guys, I don't know what it is, but you seem closer than you ever have before. In the time that they have known us when we were dating and now our marriage. You guys just seem closer. You seem more on the same page. And those were all things that I was like, wow, okay, somebody who's not even aware of what's going on sees the difference.
Yep.
And feels the difference. So,
all right, guys, I hope that this conversation really helped you get a sense of why we use correction the way we do, because this really is the primary way that we use correction now, and it's been really helpful for us. And so we wanted to share that with you. So I hope that this conversation really did help you kind of get a sense of that and what we were trying to communicate here. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. We'd love to hear your feedback. Otherwise, we will talk to you next time.
see you later.